It's fix number 56 heading your way with some interesting fixes in it. Let's take a look at what's coming. Good evening. I am Old Dead Man, your host. We are looking at War Thunder's website today, and thank you, by the way, for joining me today. We've got some fixes that were applied this morning, so let's take a look at what Gaijin changed. First up, they had an error where you'd hit the chat box, and it would actually block control of your tank. So it ended up being basically an immobilized pillbox. You couldn't dismiss the chat box, you couldn't move your tank, you couldn't do anything but use your mouse to shoot things. Well, unless you're a mouse, that's really not what you're supposed to be doing. So they have fixed that bug, and you should be able to close your chat box and keep on moving your tank to get out from under fire. Now, this is a fascinating title here. Clarified the lateral tenacity of a chassis. Basically, it's saying they screwed up the side effects of a vehicle on a slope. So if you were driving up a slope, you could suddenly find yourself being pulled to the top of the slope, whee, or sliding down to the bottom of the slope when you shouldn't be in either way. It got really good for people who are doing drifting, not so good for people trying to actually do the things that a tank is supposed to do. So they've done some fixing up on that, and you should see that working a lot better. Certain helicopters had their aiming marks taken away, kind of without intention. Those have been restored, and now you'll be able to see them, especially on the Mi-24. For those of you who are lucky enough to be running an NVIDIA GPU, there were a couple of graphical bugs you were facing, and they've kind of done some work on getting rid of those. That would be apparently they had a square showing underneath a highlighted aircraft during night battles. And also during night battles, there were some dark bars showing up while you're actively rotating. I have not seen either of those because I don't have an NVIDIA GPU, but for those of you that do, you got some fixes coming. Now, this is one that has affected those of you at higher tiers with onboard defensive systems. It would show the wrong direction where a threat was coming from. So now they've actually patched that up, so you should be able to react to enemy threats in a much more expedient fashion instead of wondering exactly where it was in the direction it wasn't at. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. It really helps the channel. Finally, they have reviewed the recharging time of certain ammo belts at points. The longer ammo belts for the automatic belt-fed cannons were taking way too long to refill, and sometimes it could take up to 4 whopping minutes to reload some of these. They've really revised a bunch of those vehicles to have reload times on a point of only 20 seconds. And thank goodness, sitting there with some of these vehicles and you're sitting waiting for ammunition because you have to shoot it all out before you can get another belt. And now they've got it so that when it's out, you'll get some pretty quick. Relatively speaking, of course. Now, there were some other fixes as well. None of them really jumped out at me. Some good fixes for the Leclercs here, especially like this overestimated autoloader reload time and underestimated pivot turn time. None of the others really jumped out at me on a review, but there are a couple of good ones. This one's an interesting one. I have done a couple of matches in my Israeli ground and air tree, and the S-199 would only let you spawn in once in a ground RB match. That has now been upped from 1 to 3 because it is effectively a reserve aircraft. Now, that doesn't mean you can bring it in without the spawn points, but at least you have the option if you do. This is another interesting one that I don't know what to make of. The engine volumes of enemy allied ground vehicles have been aligned with each other. Does that mean that you will hear them at the same volume levels, or you won't be able to differentiate them unless you just happen to know that an M60 sounds different than an MBT-70? Don't know, but let's keep an eye on that one. Let me know if you find out what it is. And that's all the fixing news that's fit to print. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in War Thunder. 56 heading your way. Let's get serious. Good afternoon. It is not afternoon. We're going to get War Thunder's website. Phooey. We got some. Now, this is one that it was.